Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you and welcome to the BiketivistForum. Today, our topic is Viva Calle. Behind the scenes, we have visionary Ed Solis with us. As always, our trainings will be recorded and shared on our website and available on YouTube. If you take some time, please, to rename yourself, include your city and your preferred pronouns. We're going to ask that the questions that we usually take during the chat, if you can hold off on your questions until the end. That way Ed can give his full presentation and maybe you can all take some notes. So I know we normally like ping them throughout, but for this meeting, we're going to ask that you just hold off on your questions. And then you can also mute yourself and turn your video off. All right, so just going over our guidelines. This is for the chat and also for the meetings afterwards. Make space, take space. Be aware of how much time you're talking versus listening. Allow others to speak up. If there's someone that hasn't said anything in a long time, ask them if they have something on their mind, if there's something they like to share. Always be respectful of one another and our differences. Let's try not to interrupt. If there's something that you feel really strongly about, maybe you can just put your hand up in the meeting and let them know that you would like to get back to that topic. Staying on topic is very important. Focusing on what's relevant at the moment and taking other conversations offline. This is the most important thing. Assume good intent. If there's something that you're like questioning about, just think of it as you would think of yourself. Every now and then we can be confused. So assume the same thing of others. Our agenda, we're running a little behind, but if you've already included your name, that's our beginning portion. Our guest for the day is Ed Solis. If you're familiar with Viva Calle, it is San Jose's one and only open street event. It is very popular. Lots of cities have asked about how they too can have something like that. And being that we have our local teams here from Santa Clara County and San Mateo County, I received some questions. I know you too are excited about that. I was able to send Ed over some of your questions, so we'll be hearing those answers throughout the presentation. But please, as I said, remember our Q&A panel will be at the end of the presentation. Ed has already stated that he's going to do about 20 minutes and he really does want to leave the rest of it open to Q&A. So that is like just as equally as important as his presentation. We want you all to have the skills and the tools when you walk away to feel like you can do this yourself. After the Q&A, we'll be transitioning as usual to our breakout rooms. You'll jump into your local team to discuss your issues. And from 6 to 7 o'clock will be our breakouts. You already know SVC needs members like you to join today. If we have any visitors, hello, it's great to have you. If you know someone that you think would be a great addition to the team and has some skills that would make your team stronger, please don't hesitate to invite them, especially to any of our upcoming events or rides. Speaking of upcoming events, we have a few that you can invite people to on March 5th, the BART Phase 2, March 8th, a lot of word, our ride leaders training, and we'll have someone that can possibly speak a little bit later. If you're interested in these, let me know and we'll drop some of these in the chat. Our Farm Box by Bike, that's with our partnership with Vegilution. We'd love to have you out there. The weather is great opportunity to get out and serve your community. And then it's in the not too far future, our Energizer stations for Bike to Wherever Day. We are looking for people to sign up. As it states there, Energizer stations take a lot of planning. So we need you to sign up early so that we can get a head start on this. Yep. Our next topic, you can mark your calendars, is the BiketivistForum. It will be number 11, moving on March 16th. The topic down below is parking minimums. Some of your local teams may be thinking to yourself, finally, we've been talking about that. We heard you. And we're looking forward to having a great set of panelists to discuss that in detail. If there is anyone that you could think of that you think would be an expert on that, if you want to email me directly to let me know and we can see if we can get them on, we'd greatly appreciate it. All right, and from now, I'm going to sign out. This is our breakout instruction for later, not for now. I'm going to hand it over to Ed, and he's going to give us an exciting behind the scenes tour of Viva Calle San Jose.
Right on. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you virtually. I think I know a few, and for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ed Solis, and I am really fortunate to work with the great city of San Jose, and I oversee all of our public space activations, including our flagship program, Viva Calle. As Diana said, I'm going to crunch a 4-hour presentation in 30 minutes. So I often let people know it's like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. You know, you're not going to get it all, you're going to get a little bit, but that's just how it's going to go because our time is short, and we're going to have a great Q&A after. So if you write down those questions or if you submit them in the chat, we'll facilitate those at the end. And as always, if you would like to set up time with me outside and have a discussion or a Zoom or come out and visit us, Viva Calle is going to be May the 1st. We'd be love to have you and show you how we do it. And so with that, I'm going to jump right into my presentation. Here we go. Share. Okay, so the very first thing I tell everyone is every city needs an open street program. It doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are. Once we started doing Viva Calle in San Jose, I started to advocate for open street programs throughout the Bay Area and throughout the country. I was very fortunate enough to learn from the gentleman who actually began the whole concept in the Americas, a gentleman named Gil Penalosa, who was the former Department of Recreation director in Bogota, Colombia, and his brother was the mayor, which always makes it easy to get stuff going. And Gil had an amazing presentation. And so the first thing, I think we all know this, but if you don't, if you look at any city in the world, the entire world, the largest amount of public space are our streets. Unfortunately, they're only used for one thing, and that's moving people, cars from place to place. It's a massive area. A lot of them are not pedestrian safe. They're not made in America with buffered bike lanes in some areas. And so from a car-centric society, this is what we use our streets primarily for. So how did we get here? How did Viva Calle come to San Jose? Well, if you look to the left, that's a picture of Gil Penalosa. If you've never had a chance to hear him speak, he's an amazing, well-renowned urbanist. He talks about parks and places, connecting people to people, social equity in its truest form. And Gil was able to start the Ciclovia in Bogota, which runs every Sunday, 52 Sundays of the year. They don't miss one Sunday. It's over 100 miles long. I don't know the kilometers. I'm American, so they measure theirs in kilometers. It's over 100 miles long. It's done every Sunday. And Gil started that at the end of the 80s, early 90s, when the drug cartels kind of owned public space. And so he did face some intimidation, him and his brother. But really what they did is they brought back public space to people. And so I was very fortunate enough to listen to Gil. It was my chihuahua, to hear Gil speak at a 3-day conference on open street programs in Guadalajara. I have to say that, for those of you who know me, I'm not a cyclist by nature. It's not my background. I'm a community person. And so when I was asked to go down to this training, it was actually in a secret shopper capacity. I was basically going at the behest of the Knight Foundation as somebody who works in programming and community and just listening to Gil speak. And all I was supposed to do is listen and report back. And so I was extremely skeptical. The first couple of days we had lots of discussion. And as a guy who drives to 7-Up to get a Slurpee and drives back and it's 2 blocks away, the first thing I thought was nobody in San Jose is ever going to want to close down streets. You just don't do it. This is crazy. And at one point Gil pulled me aside and in Spanish. She said, "Hey, I kind of noticed you seem a little negative, you know?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not so negative, pessimistic, but you know, Gil, you know, we love our cars, and I think this is great in Guadalajara, where they also do it 52 Sundays a year. But I just figured, you know, you go back, you're just going to get beat up. You bring this stuff up." And one of the greatest things that has ever happened to me professionally was visiting that Sunday on the ride in Guadalajara. And so Gil pulled us over on our bikes and he said, "Look, we're not gonna be able to stay together. You're free to do whatever you want. Check it out, you know, for yourself. We'll meet at one end of the spike. They do 40 miles in Guadalajara." He said, "We'll regroup, we'll jump in vans, and then we'll go over to another part of the event." And for those of you who heard me speak before, it was more, it was, you know, I'm not being dramatic. It was very touching. It was extremely spiritual for me. Being Mexicano, you know, coming from a Mexican American background, I was able to kind of roll the streets. And there are two stories that I share with folks. The first was a 90-year-old, 89-year-old lady who was selling fruit, you know, cut up on the corner. And I asked her, "Senora, how does the ciclovia impact your life?" She goes, "I've been standing on this corner since I was a little girl selling fruit. And I sold fruit Monday through Saturday, every morning, all day. And then, of course, I went to church on Sunday. And now," she says, "you know, as a good Catholic, you can go to church on Saturday night when the sun's down and it counts. So I only work Sunday. I sell all of my fruit on one day and I get to actually spend time, you know, in my home relaxing." The second story I like to tell is I came across a group of some vision impaired and some blind folks. And I talked to the head of the group and he goes, "You know, this is the best thing for us because these streets are extremely dangerous. There's no, you know, we have very little rules. People blow through stop signs. There's a lot of trucks. So this group, it would be very dangerous for us to get out and experience this wonderful open space. And so this is what we've been doing for years. And so it was just really amazing. And so, you know, I came back on Monday and I was, you know, I just basically worked the whole weekend. I went straight into work and I ran in with all of my papers and I was pumped up and I told my boss, "We got to do this." And then they sent me for the mandatory drug test you're supposed to get at work when you're acting strangely. And I passed with a C minus. And, you know, it was from then on, it was just a job of getting people to buy into this concept that they didn't see, but something I was very passionate about. And as you can imagine, you know, it doesn't go over well. You know, when you talk to people about closing streets, everybody's going to get up in arms. And I remember distinctly somebody pulling me aside in one of the rooms, you know, as a city employee. They're like, "Hey, man, you know, I care about you. You're a great guy. But, you know, people lose their job over this." And I thought about it for a second. I said, "Well, I'm in a union. I'm not going to worry about it. They'll send me to the water treatment plant. Worst case scenario, yeah, we're going to give this a try." And so from the very get-go, it was kind of one of those things. I kind of had to figure things out. And again, not being of the transportation in the background, one of the things that I started from, you know, was where do I begin with this? This is a great concept. I need to make it, you know, a reality. I need people to see what I'm talking about. And so I had to build a coalition of the willing. To my surprise, there's a lot of people like riding bikes, you know, people who are active cyclists. And guess what? They work within the city. And so one of the things I started to think about is like, who do I need on board? And so you'll see in the list to the left, these are most of the people that you're going to need to get on board when you be in a coalition, because if you're by yourself, you're going to get destroyed. You can't be the only crazy person about closing down streets. They'll send you for the mandatory drug test, and then you'll be hanging out somewhere, but not at your organization. And so I decided to put together, you know, a really great team. And so the top 4 or 5 are probably super important. They should be part of any committee or any group that's talking about your open space programs. But the first thing, for those of you who want to start a program, an open streets program, they're by and large either run by a nonprofit or a city. San Jose is extremely rare because we are a city-run program, and there's good and bad to that, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Most open street programs in America and throughout the world are run by nonprofits. And so for your city, if you're a city employee, you got to start thinking about, the bureaucracy and things of that nature, which are good and bad. Or if you're a nonprofit, you got to think about how are you going to leverage a partner within the city, because this really needs to be a partnership between a nonprofit and the city. So that's why we partner with the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. Shiloh and her team have been with us every step of the way since we began. Well, not Shiloh, but the organization. And the nonprofit serves as, by and large, as the political turning wheel, greasing of the wheel, if it will. Where as as a city employee, I cannot have meetings with the mayor and just say, hey man, you should be doing what I want you to do. It doesn't work that way. So step one is you want to decide, darn it, if you want to be, city run or nonprofit. The second most important step, folks, is working with public safety. Public safety are by and large going to be the largest obstacle to get over. When I do, visits, and when I have people, who want to talk over the phone, one of the things we talk about is the ability or the inability for groups to communicate with public safety. And often we forget that is their job. Their job is to make these large events or these, different size events safe, first and foremost. We live in a time, we live in a society where, unfortunately, we have to worry about emergencies and different acts of violence. And so one of the things that I learned from Gil was, don't fight with the police. If they tell you they need 100, you use 100. They say you need 10, you use 10. And these relationships will come about in time. But the biggest door that's going to close is if the police either don't see the vision that you are sharing, or there's some kind of friction between public safety and any effort. And so one of the things that I did was, I sat down with our then chief of police, Eddie Garcia, and his folks. And, they were very concerned. Obviously, I mean, you got to be concerned. What people don't see is what Open Street really is. When you start thinking about 100,000 people, the first thing you think of is chaos. What could go wrong? Well, everything could go wrong. We get that. But the chances of that are slim if you do things right, if you have the right connection with public safety, and if you really think this through. And so one of the things that I said was, hey, Los Angeles does 10 to 12 of these a year. They call it the LA Sikh Livia. It's run by a nonprofit. I said, let's get some officers. We're going to go down south. We're going to have 880s, which is Gil's organization. He's going to facilitate the meetings. And I said, do the cop thing. You guys do the cop talk. And if you absolutely hate this thing and you think it's the worst thing in the world, I will shut up and go work at the water treatment plant. I love people out there. I use that as an example. And so we went to Los Angeles. They connected with PD, and at the end of the day, we all connected. And the three officers that went with us were like, I got to tell you, this was nothing like I expected. I saw families, I saw animals, I saw people having fun, I saw smiles. See, it's a good thing. And so they gave us the blessing to come back and to start to work things out. The Department of Transportation is paramount. In Los Angeles, the Department of Transportation actually does the route, and I'll get into some of the qualities and some of the characteristics of a route. But DOT obviously is going to be a big player. The thing about our open street programs, and you'll see, is that you don't want to gridlock a city. People are already going to hate you for closing the streets, but you don't want to just completely close it. So DOT helps us not only design the route to impact more business areas and less homes, but they also create a traffic flow plan. So during the open street program, certain points are crossing points, and the lights are timed just like they are. And you have volunteers, pull out a rope, cars go through, cars come by, the light turns red, you stop it, and people go through it. And that helps eliminate some of the congestion and some of the backup. Now, in your mind, you might be thinking of smaller routes, smaller roads. Our first time out, we closed Story Road, and that gave some people some late night dreams, bad dreams, including myself. But we'll work through that. Elected officials, again, we can't do anything without our council, and our San Jose is a council strong municipality. That means you got the mayor and 10 smaller type mayors. And so you got to really have their buy-in, because they're the ones who are going to get most of the calls about impacted businesses and parking and things of that nature. VTA, or your mass transit organization, is also important. You're going to be rerouting buses. And when I met with VTA, I was surprisingly, I was completely amazed that everybody I know was a cyclist. If you work for VTA, you're like, duh, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. And so when I started my presentation, they were all just shaking their heads, yes, and I was just like, oh, I don't have to go into the whole spiel. They're like, no, just tell us what the plan is. And so VT has not only been a sponsor, but a partner from the very first day. You also want to talk about to communities that are going to be impacted by the route. We hold 5 community outreach meetings in different communities, traditionally in business hubs or business districts, so that business owners, they're usually the ones who are the most connected to council members, can hear about what's going on. It's not a permission. We're not asking. We're saying, hey, this is how it's going to impact your day. This is what it's going to look like. And for those of you who absolutely positively cannot stomach this idea and hate it, it's on a Sunday. And if you hate it that much, on Monday, call me, and I promise we'll never come back by your business again. And guess what? I've never had one of those phone calls. Businesses along the route are going to be your biggest proponents. Are they going to be your biggest advocates? Are they going to be, the people that are out there that gets you? So we do a lot of one-offs with businesses, from the small community, pizza places, to the larger restaurants and bars. We do a lot of one-on-ones. We do a lot of canvassing, and we'll talk about that as well. Public health is probably one of your second, if not your, second or third largest partner. Public health, especially the county of Santa Clara's public health office, are phenomenal. They are amazing human beings. It's been a pleasure working with them over the years. And Open Streets program has something for everyone. What people usually do when they call me, they're like, hey, are you the jerk that's closing down the streets? I say, I'm the jerk that's building community. I'm also the jerk that's going to bring a lot of business to your area. And I'm the jerk that's going to help you figure this out. And so for me, as somebody who doesn't cycle every day, I see our Open Streets program as a social benefit, but they really are a health benefit. We're creating open space. Talk about equity. We're creating a 6 to 7 mile linear park with access to everyone. Everyone can do the Open Street program. Traditionally, you'll see bicycles, but you can walk it, you can skate it, you can ride it. We have the young and the old, the people who are in shape, the people who aren't in shape. You can basically do whatever you like in a public space that's usually not available to you. So, I come out and we come out to folks, and especially folks in public health, like, this is 100,000 people that you can outreach to. So we work through the public health. We receive a number of different grants from them, everything from, spreading the word of diabetes. We worked last year with the census through the county and the city. And so there's something for everybody, but our Open Street programs at the core are a social and a health program. And then the private sector. Speaking of the private sector, we have tons of, high-tech companies throughout the Bay Area, and we have something for everyone. If you look, around our cities, there's a big what to do downtown San Jose about more billboards. These are things that people pay millions and billions of dollars for to organize, to say, look at my business, look at what we do, because people are driving by at 40 miles an hour. They're not going to see the mom and pop place that makes huaraches in East San Jose, or the taco place, or the place where they make pottery. And so people have to invest in these big, massive signs, because that's what we're used to, right? We're used to seeing the sign on the freeway at the intersections of 101, and to get some eyes on it. When we reach out to the public sector, we always say, you want to talk about impressions, everywhere from our social media to our video content to our online presence, plus 100,000 people is what we average. Think about that as potential customers, but they can also be advocates. They can also be volunteers. So think about a captured audience, and what can you spread through those folks to advocate for your business, for your nonprofit, for your faith-based organization. And so there are just, like I said, there's something for everybody in Open Street programs. Now, people often talk about, and if you haven't, this is a great thing. There's no beginning or ending to Open Streets. You're welcome to jump on everywhere you go. So people often say, where does it start? It starts wherever you want to jump in. And so I use this picture often because if you notice in the background, you can see that little, you can see the balloon arch, right? And I got a few emails and the people are like, where was the finish line? You know, we crossed the finish line, but we didn't get like a medal or anything like that. It's not a race, folks. It was just, you know, it's just decorative. So people often think it's a race. It's not. It's a slow roll. And if you look at this picture shows you basically the people who we engage in our Open Street program. You see kids, you see adults, you see people of all abilities, in all backgrounds. So the difference between an Open Street program and a special event or a fair is truly the distance. At its essence, like I said before, the Open Street program is a social program for me. And it's really hard to get that social impact, that economic impact, the impact to air quality and traffic when you have a 3 or 4 block program, right? Hey, if you got to do that to start off in your city, more power to you, rock and roll. But we came right out of starting gate. You might say, Ed, San Jose, and blah, blah. Listen, it was me and my buddy Brian and a part-time rec leader, Zach, making this. We had no budget. We had no marketing, had nothing but all I got was the green light to try to make it work. And so, you know, Gil said the minimum is 6 miles. So when you think about that, it sounds like a tall task, but again, in order to get those impacts to the community, to socioeconomics, the economic impact, the social integration, you want people to get out of their community. I often say San Jose is a big city of little cities. You know, everybody in Willow Glen's in Willow Glen, everybody downtown, the downtown's the best thing in the world. East side is like, hey, don't forget about us. Alviso's way up there, like I think we're in San Francisco, you know, and everyone kind of stays where they're at. And that's why you need that distance to get people to get out of their neighborhoods and see those neighborhoods and those landmarks and those businesses that they've never seen before. So you really need to decide what the length of your route is going to be. And that's really going to determine if we're talking about a street fair or we're talking about an open street program. You always want to cross social economic boundaries. So what I do when I sit down with DOT is I say, look, I want to go from a low to a middle to a high income community. I want all of these people intersecting in their communities, in their businesses, in their public spaces. I'm originally from Los Angeles. I don't want to see any boos in the chat. And when I first moved here in 2000, I realized a lot of the people that I work with had never really kind of had gone to certain areas. And so when we first did our Open Street program, we went to East San Jose, and man, there were some people at City Hall are like, you know, I've been here my whole life. I've never really been to East San Jose. And I asked them, well, why is that? They're just like, you know, our parents didn't let us go over there. Why? You know, no, if I don't know, tell me why, you know? And it's these boundaries and these silos that we create through social economics and cultural, you know, and we kind of limit ourselves. And through the Open Streets program, you know, after we did our first one, there were so many people that I worked with who were like, man, have you ever been to Emmerprouche Park? It's a 40-acre working farm. I was like, you don't say. They're like, there's chickens in the road, best tacos I ever had in my life. It's like, yeah, that's why we do these things. And so it's important that when you design your route, that you take those factors into account, that you want people to socially integrate. Nothing is as equal as the streets. You don't see any Ferraris, there's no Teslas, a couple of knuckleheads on e-bikes, but that's okay. But for the most part, you're riding your bike. You're elbow to elbow with elected officials and people from other cities and people from throughout your city. And so you want to make sure that you do that. You also want to impact business districts. We have done neighborhoods in a certain part, and again, they've been very receptive because we go out there and we knock on doors. But you always want to impact industrial and business districts for the big bang for the buck. You get less complaints, and then who's going to call the council member and the mayor to complain? The businesses. Guess what? After you have they're going to be like, hey, can you bring it back again because we ran out of, you know, whatever they're selling. Bars and restaurants tend to do extremely well, and other businesses, as long as they're creative, and we can talk a little bit about that later. Again, you don't want to lock residents in. Community outreach is paramount, as is marketing. We have done some really great surveys that I will be happy to share with you folks through the Mineta Transportation Institute. Dr. Philbrick and her people are amazing, and Asha and just all those folks that work there. We collect the data, they crunch it, and they create surveys for us which show a ton of not only diversity in the folks who come, but where they're coming from, what they're doing. And we found that the most impact was through social media. We spent a lot of money on billboards, like I was talking about, and newspaper and stuff. And that's still great. Print is fabulous. Man, my man, Sal Pizarro always gives us love in the Merc. But by and large, most of the people heard about us from Facebook and Instagram. So marketing is really good when you're starting off, but remember to invest a lot more in social media, maybe not as much. So how are you going to get, how are you going to get going? You know, I always talk about this, you know, I joke a little bit, but bottom line, sustainability equals money. You know, who's going to pay for it? You know, I'm a taxpayer. Yeah, me too, man. I wish I didn't have to, but I do too. But what's your complaint? So costs are going to vary from city to city. On average, it costs us about $140,000, $150,000 per event. And the majority of that cost is public safety. We have different amount of officers depending on the route, depending on the amount of closures, if we have to impact freeways. So the costs are going to vary from city to city. Here's the big question. Here's, you know, people always ask, well, how many police officers do you need? My answer is whatever they determine. There's no price tag on safety. So, you know, some cities use less, some cities use more, some cities just pick up the tab, and some cities or some nonprofits have to pay the police. So within our department, I mean, within the city of San Jose, we actually roll over funds to the San Jose Police Department because of many reasons. Primarily, they have to use off-duty officers, and they are extremely short-staffed. So at times, they'll actually have to pull out some crossing guards to help us with the route. And so on an average of 100,000 people, it's about $150,000 that have, you know, the cost, cover the cost of equipment and rentals and some of the other equipment. But by and large, it's the public safety that's going to be the big price tag for you. Many budget line items, we really stick to the basic when you start off, folks. You know, I have a bunch. We've been doing it 7 years. You don't need all those. You know, just think public safety. Think about, you know, like some of the basics like barricades, lunch for the volunteers and the staff, staffing, you know, and some marketing. Like I said, we came out of the gate with like, I mean, I had to beg the police. And again, Eddie Garcia was awesome. They picked up the cost of the police for the first couple of years, actually, until they finally said, all right, you guys make enough in sponsors, enough of that stuff. Open streets are free and they're public health programs. City and county funding are there. A lot of times, folks, like I said, we're helping the county check boxes, or we're helping a nonprofit, you know, get surveys on food inequity. We get, you know, everything from air quality measurements, traffic counts. There are people out there who are looking for a lot of people to talk to, or to get information out to, or to build awareness. Impressions on social media are what's going to sell your pitch. Again, what I said about, you know, eyes on, as opposed to, you know, a big billboard or printed, or they go a long way. And we actually raise a lot of money for sponsorships for Viva Calle, a lot more than you think. Los Angeles went from being in the red in 2 years to being in the black in 3 years, you know, and now we don't, I mean, of course, we always knock and talk, and, you know, we work grants and multi-year grants, but a lot of times we have sponsors who come to us who want to basically give us money on $20,000 for what? I don't know. Well, don't say that. The city has to know for what. Otherwise it blows, you know, all the analysts lose their mind and they start spinning. It's got to be something. It's got to be something. Can't just be from free money, but it is. So we're still having those discussions with our finance people that it's okay to have money, you know, donated to the city. And no matter what the sponsor out there that you may have in mind, there's something for everybody. There's something that every business can fund or pay for because it has something for everybody, truly. So here's an example of a route map. And this is just to give you the basic layout. So you don't want to, this is one of our favorites. We call it Park to Roses. That's another fun thing, coming up with the names, things of that nature. People love our branding and marketing. If you look here, we have what are called activity hubs. And so they're usually spread apart. And this is where people can take a break, get off their bikes. They have free bike repair, water, drinks, I got it, water, drinks, bathrooms. It's usually in a park or in a large business district. Japantown always does an amazing job of activating their hubs. As you work through, what we do is we have community partners like different business districts that will self-activate those hubs. So we'll give them the infrastructure, the porta potties, the hand washing, the sanitation, a small stage. Sometimes you don't really need a stage or a small sound system. And my team works with these business groups, and they'll get dancers and singers, and it starts at, real early, and people get to get out there, and it doesn't cost you a penny. Those businesses and those communities get to activate Bethesda Park like they want. The little dots along the route, those are crossing points. If you look down around the Arena Green area, you'll see these two. We have a light rail system, and so we need 2 crossings. So again, we work very closely with BTA, as well as our police department and DOT to make sure that these crossing points are safe, and each crossing point needs a volunteer group. So that's another thing we'll talk about. We actually get funding. So if you look down here, you can see that the Stanford Health Foundation, we charged $20,000 for a sponsorship for a hub. This was Google. This is an earlier copy I can find on Google's on, and then up here AARP. And so if you do the math, we're looking pretty steady. Okay, so you think you're ready to go, right? Just when you think you're ready to go, I'm telling you, these are the things that like kind of give me back pain in doing. So community outreach is crucial. You have to have enough folks to canvas. We literally go door to door. I know your heads are popping right now. Oh, you'll be able to do it. Trust me, you'll get there. But you have to find your friends, your family. My kids, I put them on beach cruises. Get out there, knock on that door, give them a flyer. And for the most part, people are excited. I've never seen it, but I'd like to see it. But you got to be ready, because people often ask me, do people complain? Man, people would complain if you're giving out free money. People complain. They're going to do it. It's just, it's in our DNA. It's what we do. And then there are people, the professional complainers. Man, if Jesus was giving out hot dogs, they'd be like, he doesn't have a hairnet. And you got to do something about that. I'm calling the police. And so you got to be ready for this thing. And so you have to have your staff prepared to talk about the important things. It's a social event. It's great for families. It's great for, and then it's like I tell everybody, it's one Sunday. It's from 10 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. If it just devastates your life and ruins your business and just, you can't stomach it, I promise we won't come back. Guess what? I've never had that call. With your volunteers, we use about 200 volunteers. Again, we're a 6-mile course. 200 is about the right number. We partner with San Jose State, all of our Job Corps, all of our nonprofits and high schools and junior colleges. And we have a great crew of volunteers. We also partner with Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, because every crossing point needs a group of people to volunteer. Now, these are cool because they can just be high school kids. As long as you have an adult that's present, it's just pulling up the thing, putting it down, waving to people. It's a great day. So you really got to make sure you have that down. You got to make sure that you train them properly. Again, you're marketing a social media campaign. If you're really planning on doing it and you want to do it, help me help you help yourself. Give yourself a year. I know you're like, no, man, that man's PowerPoint. We know how to do this stuff. We're going to do it next week or in a month. Trust me, help yourself. I would say if this is your first time out of the gate, give yourself a good 12 months to put together your coalition of the willing and to put all of your resources in place. Because being a combat veteran, I've had the life experience of being in some pretty rough situations. The morning of the first Viva Calle, I stepped out of my SUV at Emma Preach Park at 4 in the morning, and I literally got sick. I threw up right there in the parking lot because I had a dream that it was me and my kids riding down Story Road and people were throwing bread at us. It's a horrible dream. So you don't want that. You don't want to go through all this work and then nobody shows up. But trust me, people are going to show up. Your hubs, make sure you have lead staff identification. I still do a hub honcho, what we call it. I still have a city staff, a full-timer in charge, and they work with part-time staff and volunteers to manage those hubs, because by and large, that's where most of the issues will come up as far as like kids are getting lost or they want to complain to somebody. That's where it's going to go down. The route is usually just moving and people having a great time. We also have what we have called scout routes. We have people on bikes, myself and our staff are out there riding finding people who might need a bike repair or just are a little tired and need some water and want to relax. As you get closer to the event, you want to make sure that you have your coalition of the willing with their all hands on deck meeting. And the 7-8 months leading up, we'll meet once a month with DOT, PD, VTA, all these folks, right? But as we get closer, the month before, we meet every week just to go through everything, make sure we're doing stuff. It's also vital that you walk or ride your route, because basically you're going to have to block every single alley, parking lot, ingress, egress, and that's time consuming, but you got to do it because you got to make sure that nobody gets on that route and that everybody along the route understand, you know, it's car free. No, you can't just back out real quick and go across the street. No, you can't go to the liquor store and come back. You know, our police help us enforce that. And by and large, people are ready for it because we've done outreach, we've knocked and talked, and it's usually a pretty fun day. So the $1 million question. So this gentleman here, Aaron Paley. Aaron is the founder of the LA Ciclavia. He is a poet and a photographer by trade. And I was extremely lucky to spend time with not only Gil, but Aaron. And LA opened the doors. They're like, here's how you do it. Here's what you don't do. Don't do this, don't do that. Engage this. So we learned a lot of things. And, you know, I was taking notes and I was walking away and Aaron grabbed me by the shirt and he's like, really, you're just going to leave like that? I'm like, well, yeah, I've been here for 3 days, man. I thought you were getting sick of me. He goes, you haven't asked the $1 million question. I said, well, what is it? He's like, you should say, what do you do first? What do you invest in first? I was like, okay, Aaron, what do you invest in first? He looked me right in the eye. He got really close. He's all, academia. And I was like, I don't know what that means. What are you talking about? He's like, you have to partner with somebody to measure the impact of what you do. Because in the end, if you're not measuring it, it doesn't exist. I can tell you facts and figures, but if I can't give you something that proves that we are measuring the impacts to society, to businesses, to health, to air quality, to traffic, it doesn't mean anything. Well, guess what? When I reached out to the Moneta Transportation Institute, they're like, this is exactly what we're trying to do. This would be a great project for us. And so for pro bono, for 5 years, they've done amazing survey results for us. So every time somebody says, you know, this program is crappy, you know, it costs us $150,000 and we hate the Parks and Recs department. Well, here's a survey that we did a couple of years back. 83% of the people said they spent over $21 or more. 100,000 plus people, 80-something% spending $21 or more, do the math, it's about $1.7 in economic impact to the city of San Jose. And that's just surveying people. My wife always spends more than $21, you know? And so, you know, no matter what people have, you've got to have that data to help bolster what you're doing, but also to build that sustainability, especially around you know, sponsorships and funding, because that's what people want to see. They want to see the truth, the impact, and where they're at. And so for anybody out there, you know, who wants to know how this can help them or whatever, I have an answer to every one of those questions, as well as I have a question to every complaint, because the complaints are going to come and we'll handle that in Q&A. But with that, I hope I didn't blow everyone's minds. Probably did a little bit, right? Maybe not in a great way. But we are ready at the Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ed. So I posted a little message in the chat. I hope you all saw it. It is time for question and answer. Please feel free to copy and paste and get them pinging and going. Goodness, I have questions, but I'm hoping that if we can at least get a question from each team lead so that we have questions coming in from each city, especially if you're interested in doing something like this, take advantage of this opportunity. All right, we have a question from Lauren. What advice do you have for volunteer-led efforts versus efforts led by the city?
Yes, that's a great question. So one of the things that people always ask, you know, is who's in charge? So whoever's in charge, right? So the city, as a city-led organization, we lead our volunteers. You know, we're in charge of the training. We get them fed, we get them a shirt. And so we do the whole VIP for them. If you're a nonprofit working for your volunteers, you can kind of set the rules, right? I'm I have certain rules imposed on me by the city only because I'm a city employee. As a nonprofit, you may not have to do these things, right? We went overboard. We did a ton of training, a ton of political community outreach. So I would say, you know, as a volunteer-led program, you could probably, you know, trim some of the fat and really kind of scale back the impact to city staff. So I would, you know, I could see the positives and the negatives. As far as a workforce, yeah, the nonprofit I think is going to have an advantage because you don't have to pay your off-duty officers. I mean, I'm sorry, your staff. You know, if you work hard to get all your volunteers, they are exactly that. They're going to help you volunteer and run your program at a lower cost.
Let's see. Thank you for that
Hope that makes
response. Ed, anyone else with questions? Let's see. So you know what? I'm going to scroll back so we had some questions early on from Eris. Let's see. How do you estimate attendance? Both
Oh man, that's a great question. And I'm going to give you the honest to God truth. It's nobody knows. Nobody knows this. So one of the things I always worried about, and I know what you're thinking, where did you get 100,000? I'll get to that. One of the things I was concerned about is people always want to know, well, what's the bang for the buck? And so before we did the first one, you know, I called Gil, I called Aaron. Aaron's like, bro, you're going to have to use any type of formula that you can get, you know, work with your math and calculus and analytic groups at your colleges. But it's really a shot in the dark because there's no registration. There's infinite entry and exit points. He said 1 year we spent like $30,000 on a helicopter to take pictures of the route. And then we tried to count. He goes, but those people are moving. You could be counting the same people. And so what we do is we have clickers and we have volunteers at the hubs and at the crossing points, and they count every 30 minutes for a minute to people to go by. We worked with San Jose State. We have a formula. We pop it into a spreadsheet, and it gives you like an average from this to that. We always take the lowest numbers. Just so if somebody's like, oh, where'd you get that number? I could show them. And I say, we're actually using the lowest number as our estimated average attendance. Awesome. Yeah, we've talked to people counters. You know, it's a very difficult thing to do if you don't have a good starting point like registration, or just a starting point where you say go and you can count people taking off. So yeah, it's very difficult.
All right, there's an additional question from Eris. It says you are at about 5 to 7 miles now. Some cities are having difficulties getting 1 mile. How did you do it?
So just like anything, you know, when I was a kid, I'd be like, hey, Dad, can I get 20 bucks? He'd be like, $15. What the hell do you need $10 for, son? So you just got to expect that. So that's why I went big. I didn't want it. And believe me, people are going to push you to keep it small, you know, and that's why I got sent for that drug test. You just got to toe the line. Now, in a smaller city, like say Mountain View, right? Or Sunnyvale, obviously you may not even have that big of a stretch where you can kind of fill it out. So yeah, I would taper it down. But again, how are you going to get people moving from community to community? How are they going to get that 60 minutes of strenuous exercise, you know, and truly be sore the next day? Me and my family, you know, the next day we're like, oh, did we just really ride 16 miles up and down? Yeah. So yes, I would say if you're going to come right off the chute, I would say go big. And then knowing that your dad's going to be like 15, why do you need 10? You know what I'm saying? But if you just want to appease him and say, I want a mile, it's going to be hard to build up as opposed to scaling down. And then, like I said, once you have that 6 miles defined, and that's kind of like the standard, it's hard for them to cut you down past that. And we've got up to 8 miles. And so one of the feedback we got from the officers were, you know, we didn't have enough people to staff it fully. So please kind of keep it under 7 or 6. Cool. Had I started out with 2, they would have said bring it down to 1. Then before you know it, you're going in circles. So I would say take a look at your city, take a look at, you know, the best case scenario route and sell that and try to hold that to a standard. But again, don't shoot yourself in the foot. But also avoid that street fair. You know, you don't want 2 or 3 blocks. That's kooky.
So how do you work with VTA to reroute buses? And
Woohoo!
how do you publicize these new routes so that folks using buses are aware?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so we sit down early on. One of the things I was gonna pull up, but it's a little late now to show you guys too many pictures. BTA actually does an overlay of our material, our collateral. So we'll take that map that I showed you, the rack card, and they'll draw right over the top of it the bus lines and where they're going to be rerouted. They do a great job. We probably have 6 to 7 BTA folks, everyone from scheduling and management to the actual, people who know that. I mean, they know their routes inside and out. They shut up some shuttles sometimes, to make sure that people get to where they need to go. We've gone down Santa Clara, we've gone down Story, we've gone down Monterey Highway, and our partners at VTA are always on top of it. They also will help us, they'll push back. They'll be like, you know what, Ed, if we're going to do this, it's going to impact it this way. It's probably a little too far. So sometimes we'll have to adjust the route a little bit just to make sure that people are not that inconvenienced by public transportation. They're able to kind of get to where they need to go. And VTA really does go out of their way to help support our routes and reroute the buses.
Just, I guess, a follow-up question for that. How do you notify the businesses along the route so they can plan for the event?
I'm just going to turn on the lights because it's getting dark. Yes, that's another great question. So that's where so in the city of San Jose, if you're going to close a street, you have to, by law, let everyone who lives 400 feet off that road of the closure, right? So it's a mailer. That's an expense. We actually go a quarter mile back from the route, and we do it twice. You don't have to do it once. We do it twice. And so when people tell me, hey, I didn't know about this, I'm like, yeah, you did. You got the flyer right in your hand. That's why you're complaining, right? If you don't get it in the mail, we follow that up with door to door. So we go 2 weeks before and 1 week before. So we knock on doors, we check in with businesses. We also put flyers on cars that say, hey, if you're parked here on the May the 1st, between 1 o'clock in the morning and 3, your car's going to get towed. And you would not believe, we probably at the most tow 3 or 4 vehicles because we're out there telling people move your cars, what day you can expect it. We work around trash pickup days, and Sundays are always great. But yeah, we do get the occasional, I didn't hear about this. This is baloney. And 9 out of 10 times, it's not that they didn't hear about it, they just don't like it. So yeah, you have to canvass, you have to be on the streets, and you got to send those mailers out, at least in San Jose by law.
All right. So I feel like this is a great question. How do you measure impact outside of money being spent? That is, how would you suggest measuring things like community engagement, activation in new areas, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we have like a steady group of questions that we use, right? And so we'll say, age demographic, gender, how long, what did you spend most of your money on? How much do you think you spent? And those are kind of like the core questions. And then basically we can either work with a sponsor who's looking for certain dynamics or information, or data that we really want to crunch, get that number. And so we use our surveys to show those impacts. One of the big ones we use, because the county health department works with us a lot, we always try to figure out how many minutes did you get of active recreation. Would you say you walked from half hour to so-and-so? And so we go through, the demographics of the young and the old, middle-aged, and we just ask people. So I could say, at Viva Calle last year, 36% of our seniors over the age of so-and-so got this many minutes of open recreation or open active walking. And so those impacts vary really based on who wants to see what. With the city, it's the money. So we do a lot of the socioeconomic impacts. We do a lot of work with the businesses to show that economic impact, because that's a big driving force. But you can basically collect any kind of impact you'd like. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District, that's a mouthful. We've received grants from them. And, we talk about traffic counts, 64,000 vehicles, that run down Story Road. Our DOT go out there, they'll say, hey, on Sunday, you usually get this many cars to go down this length of Story Road. Obviously they're not going to disappear, but by and large, those cars are not working on one of our main thoroughfares, and in effect, helping the air get a little more cleaner in the East San Jose and some of the areas that they're interested in impact or measuring impact. And so we work with sponsors. Like I said, we work with partners to really develop that second part of the survey to gather those data points.
Awesome. So Ed, I'm just going to give you a little heads up. We are at 6 o'clock. We normally stop right now, but there's a lot of questions in the chat. So we're going to extend it for 5 more minutes.
Okay, I'll make it quick.
I have some questions that were sent to me directly from team leads. So I want to read those. And I'm also going to encourage, if we don't get around to all the questions, email your question to your team lead. This is another great reason to join today's breakout session. Send it to your team lead, and we're going to try to schedule with Ed to meet with the team lead for a little one-on-one follow-up. So one of the first questions, really important, what is required to get an open street permit?
Yeah, permission. That's it. If you're there's a good part, right, of the city. I'm inside the city, so I actually have to go through the same permitting process that anybody would. I have to find the date through our Office of Cultural Affairs. We have to make sure that we're not competing with like the Jazz Festival or things like that. And then once that date is secure, we got to go through the whole permitting process. So it's very similar. So in San Jose, you have to pick the date. You have to pay for off-duty officers. You have to meet with the police department, the fire department to ensure that you have safety. You have to submit a map of your route. You have to show where your safety points are at. You have to give a safety plan that's going to say if there's lightning, thunderbolts, whatever, this is what's going to happen. You talk about inclement weather, like where do you stop it? Things of all that. So there's a number of check marks that we do in the city of San Jose, but it's just it. In some cities, it's probably not as bureaucratic or as red tapey. But obviously, I would assume you're going to have to pay for street closure, traffic control, public safety. At the very minimum. So in our city, that's what's required. And like I said, we don't get to cut the line or anything like that. We're kind of in competition with everybody, which is fair, which is cool. So we're all right with that.
All right, I'm going to pull a question from Maria. Is there a link for San Jose's evaluation data?
Not a link, but we do have it posted on San Jose VivaCalleSJ.org. And if we don't have it on there, if you don't see it, I know because we're trying to update our website. If you shoot me an email, I'd be more than happy to share it with you. There are links at the Mineta Transportation Institute website. So you'll have to scroll through all their different surveys, but we are in there and you could easily pull it up on their website as well.
All right. Thank you for that question, Maria. I'll work on connecting you two. Let's see, I think we have questions, time for one more questions. Did you say that you had no budget for the first event? How do you pay for public safety?
You know what? There's a lot of begging. Man, there is a lot of begging. You got to get out there. And again, it's just, a relationship building. And so I actually went back to the Knight Foundation. I'm like, look, you guys got me hooked on this, so help me out. So they gave us a small grant, of which we gave, like 3, like a third to Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition to be our nonprofit. But really, I was fortunate that with some of that seed money, we were able to take that tour to Los Angeles and really get buy-in from the police. And like I said, working with Secondary Employment Unit, Lieutenant Tommy Troy and Captain Eddie Garcia, they waived the fees for that the first 2 times. They kind of ate the staffing costs. Again, giving us a heads up like, hey, you're going to have to do this. And that's where it goes back to getting people to really buy into what you're doing. So DOT waived their costs. We've got a lot of in-kind. Again, that's the good thing about being within the city. We're able, as a city, produced event to get some of these fees waived, but now we pay everything. So it was a lot of begging and borrowing. And I also had a whole other job. Like we kind of created this whole thing, on top of what we were doing before. And I was very fortunate to have a gentleman, Brian Clampett, working with me who had a background in the Christmas parade and stuff. So he really helped the program along. But yeah, it was nickel and diming it.
All right. I feel like that is about our last question. We're running really tight. Thank you, Ed. My goodness. And like I mentioned before, for those that still have questions in the chat box, please copy and paste them and forward them to your team lead. This is not the end of the discussion. Had a great conversation with Gabby, and she's like, we have these awesome speakers that come, and then we still have tons of questions and we need more follow-up. And I 100% agree with that. And I don't want these questions to get lost. So please forward them to your team lead, and we'll try to get answers to these so we can still build on this. That being said, thank you, Ed.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to see you. Take care. And every city deserves an open street program. So go make it happen.
Thank you very much, Ed. It was great.